Harold Pinter is here. The New York Times has called him, quote, one of the most important playwrights of our time. With plays such as The Caretaker, The Homecoming, and Betrayal, he has revolutionized theater. His blending of language and silence has influenced many playwrights. This summer, the Lincoln Center Festival celebrates Pinter as a playwright, an actor, a director, and a screenwriter. 9 of his 29 plays and 8 of his numerous films will be presented during the festival. I'm pleased to have him back at this table. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
So how do you feel about all this? I mean, at 70, all of a sudden the Lincoln Center says, let's have 9 of those plays and celebrate Pinter.
Well, it's gratifying.
Yeah.
I'm very happy about it. It's also very demanding,
Yeah.
the whole thing. But I'm happy about that too. I like to be challenged, and I think this is a challenge for everyone concerned, to do 9 plays in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Are you sorry at all that in a sense, a man who began as a actor, even way back at RADA,
Yeah.
ended up spending most of his creative life as a writer?
No, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. I still do a bit of acting.
I know you do, but it's not what has driven your career.
No. But I was also, even long before I was an actor, I was a writer. I was a poet when I was about 12.
I know, yes.
So I'm essentially, shall we say, a poet.
Yeah, you think of yourself most of all as a poet?
I think of myself mainly as a writer.
Yeah.
But I'm simply saying that I was, I start acting at school when I was about 16. I played Macbeth and Romeo. Yeah, that's right. How do you know all this?
Well, we hear about you. And were you bitten by it then? I mean, the notion of being able to go on stage and do your stuff?
No, then, when I was about 19, it seemed to me the only way I could possibly earn a living was by acting. I had no intention of going into any kind of office. And I managed to just stagger along and earn a few pennies, acting. But I was writing all the time anyway. Not plays. I didn't start writing plays until the mid-50s.
Yeah, why?
I mean, one of the things that, by the way, does please me very much is that in this part of one of the plays that's being done here during this season, this festival, is a play, my very first play, The Room.
Right.
And the fellow who directed it was in 1957 at the University of Bristol. It's a man called Henry Wolfe, and he acted in it too. He was a student, and he's now 70 like I am. We're very, very old friends, as you can see. And he's acting in it again,
that's great.
in The Room. So that's I'm doing that. The other play there is Celebration, which is my last play.
Yeah.
So there are 43 years between the 2 plays, and I find that rather strange and rather exciting.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about someone who does what you do, for writers, there's not much. I mean, even for dramatists, you don't think much of. This is almost like an artist retrospective for an artist, for a painter. Correct?
I think it is.
I mean, it really is an opportunity for a theater-going public to see the multiplicity of the creative career of an artist.
Yes.
Is the creative process the same in all of this? The sense of putting the words on the page, whether it's a poem or a screenplay or a play?
Oh, yes, I think so. It's always the same. I never know what's going to happen next. I never know what the blank page and something goes onto it, and I don't know when I turn the page over, I don't quite know what that's going to bring either. So it's all a wonderful, it is a true voyage of discovery, writing. For me it is.
The process of doing
I never plan a play, you see. It just happens after a while. An image happens, and then the next thing happens, and then,
But just to go back to The Room for a second.
Yeah.
It is said about a lot of your work, it starts with an image, a picture in your mind. Where was it for The Room?
Oh, that's right. Well, I don't know if you know, it was man Quentin Crisp.
Oh, sure I do.
Yes, of course you must. Well, I actually was
still alive, isn't he?
I think not.
But recently, I mean, he's been alive.
Recently,
Very
recently.
Yes.
Well, anyway, in short, I was at a party once when I was very young, 25 or something.
Right.
And I was taken to a room. Someone said, you have to meet someone in another room in this house. And I went to this room, and there was a man with bare feet fluttering around, serving bacon and eggs to an enormous man who was sitting at a table reading a comic,
Yes.
And this fellow turned out Quentin Crisp, and the man fluttering around.
Yeah.
The other man never spoke. And he was talking very
Crisp was the man fluttering around, not the man sitting down being fed
Crisp was
the
the man
eggs.
fluttering around.
Yeah, right.
And he was very talkative and very lively and engaging. But the point was he kept feeding the man, the big man.
Yeah.
And when I left the room after about 10 minutes, this image didn't go away. And finally, a couple of years later, you know, or a year later, my friend Henry Wolfe from Bristol said, I told him about this. And he said, well, why don't you write a play about it? I said, well, I will. I might. Yeah. And then he called me and said, where's the play? And I said, what play? And he said, well, you must, you said you were writing a play, and I need it in 2 weeks because I can do it at Bristol, you see. Yeah. So I said, out of the question. But then I did write the play in 4 days. Yeah. And I changed Quentin Crisp to a woman.
Right. You know. It's a woman fluttering around, serving bacon and eggs to a man. To a man sitting there.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but everything else was the same, in a sense. You just gender changed, or did it give you an opportunity to play dynamics of sexual roles?
Well, the play, I mean, all I saw was that image in that room, so that was the starting image for the play, certainly. But the play itself becomes a very violent piece of work, very unexpected and quite startling in a way. So it startled me at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, but you didn't know. When you start writing, you don't know where it's going to end.
No, I do not. I do not know.
You don't write an entire draft and then come back and work and work and work.
I do write an entire draft, but I never, and I do, I mean, and then I work and work and work, certainly. Yeah. But the principle of the draft, the gist of it, is the play, you know, the first draft.
The betrayal. Tell me where that came from.
Betrayal?
Yeah.
Well, I did actually have, that's the closest to my own life that as a play that I've written, in that I did have an affair with a woman in London years and years and years ago, when I was in the 60s. And this affair did go on for about 7 years. So it was a betrayal. Right. I was betraying my wife, obviously. She was betraying her husband, except the funny thing was that he knew about it. Yeah. And I didn't know he knew. But when I found out that he had known for, not all the time, but for a couple of years, you know, 2 or 3 years, I felt betrayed myself.
Because he never told you?
No, he never told me that he knew. And she never told me that he knew.
That he knew.
So everyone was, in a sense, was betraying everyone else, you know. And that's the play. The play was inspired by that. You know.
Roll tape. Here's a clip from the film, The Betrayal. Here it is.
Oh.
I know about last night. She told me. You were up all night, weren't you?
That's correct.
And she told you last night about her and me, did she not?
No, she didn't. She didn't tell me about you and her last night. She told me about you and her 4 years ago.
It's a great moment for him because he knows he has something he didn't know.
That's right. Mm. Oh, are we talking?
No, we are talking. I just want to see if that had him in. When you see, has film ever done, you've had 4 movies, 4 plays have been made into film. Do you feel that any of them have done justice to the play? The movies?
Yes, I think Betrayal certainly did.
Yeah.
I think it's very well made. And I also gave them the opportunity to use children in the film, which I didn't, of course, have in the play. Right. I mean, don't forget that adultery is there are always children around.
Right.
But they don't feature normally in any stage presentation. Or in this case, I was able to use children in the film who grew younger. Well, in fact, weren't even born at the beginning.
They're flashback, right.
So I think those children are extremely important. You know, there's a very, very good scene in the film, I think, where one of the little girl of 5 is having a tea with her mother, and the phone rings, and the mother goes into another room to answer the phone, thereby betraying the child immediately. She knows who's on the other end of the line, except it turns out to be her husband.
How about The Caretaker?
The film?
Yeah.
Ah, well, I'm really looking forward to seeing that again. I haven't seen it for years, and I'm really delighted that it's going to be done at the Film Festival here in New York. It's, I think it's a beautiful film in black and white, quite singular, really. But I really haven't seen it for a long time. I long to see Donald Pleasance again, who played it 3 times, you know. Yeah. He died a couple of years ago.
This is really what I meant about the experience of watching all this, having this come together. Does it offer you any insight into this a body of work that you have completed. I mean, do you look at this and see things that you didn't see before? Do you notice themes that maybe you haven't thought about because it is not your role to be analytical of your work, it is your role to do it?
I think the answer must be no. I don't. It doesn't give me an insight. It may give other people an insight.
Sure, of course it should.
But who knows? I can't answer for them. I'm slightly, quite honestly, there's so much going on here in New York. This rather remarkable season of plays and films and so on. That, and I'm acting and directing and very much involved with what's happening and going to see the other productions, that I really haven't had time to think in that way. And I don't think I will think in that way either. I mean, to say, what insights do I possess here, what new insights? I just know that there is a body of work, and I do believe that I wrote it. That's about,
Well, we can be sure about that.
Well, I think so.
The word that is frequently used about you is intuitive. And, you buy that? I mean, that you are a playwright who acts by intuition.
Well, I think that is right. I mean, I think that's quite accurate, really. When I listened, I was listening to this play, A Kind of Alaska, which is being done with One for the Road. So I listened to it on the tannoys, the line system. And it goes first. And it all came, was quite new to me. I wrote that in the 80s, I think. And I listened with considerable interest to some of the lines, because I couldn't remember actually writing them, although I realized I had. So that those lines were written through an intuitive process of discovery, I think, which is, I think, possibly quite unusual. I'm not sure. I don't know about how other writers write, really, when it comes down to it.
Here's what somebody said about you. In Pinter plays, words are probes launched into the world variously to mask, to mystify, to mock, and to murder.
Oh, really? A lot of M's in that sentence.
Yes, there is.
Yeah. Well, I know that, listen, I know that there's a hell of a lot of violence in the world, and you know that too.
Of course.
And these, I think, a good deal of this volatility, if you like, and violence, is expressed in my work. I realize that. I'm aware of that, in other words. I don't want to sound disingenuous, I think the word is, as if I don't know what the hell I'm writing about. I do know what I'm writing about, but I let it happen. But I let the words happen. I let the violence express itself, and it expresses itself in very many different ways, I think. There are very few. I think in The Room, my very first play, there is an act of physical violence. And I don't think, as far as I can remember, 29 plays, that there is another act of physical violence throughout the whole of my work. So, but there's a great deal of violence and conflict in the work. I think, there is, I'm crazy. In The Homecoming, there is.
Yeah, right.
There is an act of physical violence in The Homecoming.
But when you think about, which of these has given you the most satisfaction?
Which of the plays?
Which of the plays? One for the Road?
Oh, I don't think so, no. One for the Road was very, very... I wrote One for the Road in anger, which is not very satisfying.
No, it's not. Unless it satisfies, unless it somehow it's a catharsis.
Well, I think it did. It was a catharsis. I felt better after having written it, certainly. But I think, just coming to your question, I think that... I've always liked The Homecoming very much because I like the shape of it, I like the way it sits there. I think it has a kind of authority, which I enjoy. But quite honestly, the very last play I've written, The Celebration, possibly gave me the biggest surprise of my life, and because I believe that without any question it's the funniest play I've ever written, and I didn't expect to write a funny play. I think I've written I think my plays are quite funny.
Yeah, there is a note of wit in there.
Oh, I hope so. But Celebration, an old friend of mine, when I sent it in Australia, wrote to me and said, I thought your next play was going to be called Retribution. And here it is, Celebration. He said, I've fallen off the sofa 6 times in the last 5 minutes. And it is. It all takes place in a restaurant, And can I call it a savage farce? I think possibly it is.
Yeah. But,
so I've enjoyed that.
Yeah, more than it's given you as much satisfaction as anything you've done.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hate to sort of come back to you looking at your own plays, but it's difficult not to want to talk to a playwright about how he sees his own work. You understand that?
Right.
The preoccupation with language that you have. You know, it has been, if anything, the sort of lodestar that has driven you.
Well, that's. I think that's true. I've always. I really have always been in love with the English language.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the rhythms of speech.
Yeah.
You know, and the sense of how it sounds.
Oh yeah.
You know. I mean, someone once said about you too that you had a sense of that you were able to capture common speech and the poetry and the rhythm and all of it, as well as any playwright at work.
Well, I hope that is the case, you know, because that is one's obligation to capture it accurately, to capture language and speech accurately. So that I think I've got a pretty good ear. Not that I go around listening to anybody, but I have lived for a long time.
Well, 70 years.
And yeah, that's only about 70 years.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I do. I've absorbed language, not only through literature, but by a long way. But by the life around me.
Right. I mean, you have. It would seem to me that it could be said about you as one who has admired you from a distance. You know, that this is one who has sort of engaged himself, you know, in the passions of his time. You know, in terms of caring about politics, in terms of caring about relationships, in terms of understanding and railing against what you consider the injustice of violations of human rights.
Yeah.
You know, and torture.
Yeah. Well, I think that's certainly true, and in a way, it's interesting you use the word railing. I don't see myself as railing.
Okay, choose a better word for me.
But
it's not something so soft as understanding.
Oh, no. But it's simply being very critical.
Yeah.
I mean, I find that I subject states of affairs to a very precise scrutiny.
Yeah.
And I think that scrutiny is a real responsibility that devolves upon us all, really. I think we neglect it at our peril, you know, to really look at the world as it is, to see exactly what the hell's going on, and to be unafraid of actually putting one's finger where on the piece of the body politic, if you like, of the world. And I find that an obligation that I have to attend to more and more.
Do you find that theater is the best place to do that?
No, I don't.
Where is it?
Well, theatre is a comparatively small area, you know, really, and I do it to a certain extent.
Yeah, but it has a life beyond the smallness of its area.
Well, it probably does. I think it does, and I think it does go home. But on the other hand, that you know, W.H. Auden said that poetry never changed a damn thing, or more or less, words to that effect.
Yes. He also said that I never know what I think until I see what I write.
Oh, did he?
Yes.
But I think that, nevertheless, art can carry a force and can, go into people's unconsciousness, if you like, and ask them questions. And I do think that can happen. I think that Arthur Miller certainly does that very well. I think, without any question, that Bertolt Brecht did that. Yes. But I do it in a slightly different way, I think. But what I wanted to say was, I find that in the political arena, my activities are to do with writing letters to the press, about signing this, that, and the other, about making public speeches, in fact, which I've done quite a lot of.
I would suggest you will have a lot more impact with plays than you will with public speeches.
Oh, I don't know. Public speeches can be quite good.
Well, maybe good for you, but I mean, do you think that they have as much impact? I mean,
well, if you're speaking to a couple of hundred people, you're quite right. But I include public.
But there's nobody there criticizing, judging, praising what you say in a public speech. You may rally an audience there, and you may have some people take issue with you or support you in their own modes of communication.
But when I said public speech, I actually also meant public speech on television. And I've had an extremely interesting, quite a few numbers of contests with people on television, which have been in
You mean
London.
by that debate and...
Yeah. I had a very, very interesting, particularly interesting conversation with a man called Lord Lamont in London.
Oh, yes, yes.
Jeremy Paxman, Newsnight,
Right. Yeah.
On the Pinochet, when the law lords in London passed said Pinochet should stand trial.
Right.
I was on television with Lord Lamont, and this is very interesting, I think. I was talking about Pinochet's actual record at some point, and the 3,000 people that he was actually responsible for torturing, murdering, destroying, at least, and in the most appalling, shocking conditions and circumstances. And this fellow, Lord Lamont, actually said, well, I'm sure Allende, who Pinochet overthrew with a subscription of the U.S. government, he said, I'm sure Allende was exactly the same. And I said, wait a minute.
Exactly the same what?
Exactly the same as Pinochet.
Same character, same...
Well, no,
capable of using force the same way.
Did the same thing.
Capable of using force the same way.
Yes, not only capable, but did them, enacted.
Yeah, but don't you? I mean, there are no pure political heroes. Period.
But wait a minute. I did say to this fellow,
Yes, go ahead.
I said, "Are you saying that Allende, President Allende of Chile, was responsible for the death of one person? If so, who was that, and what evidence do you have?" He couldn't answer the question. And then I saw what happens on public arena like television, which millions of people watch. That even though I questioned what he'd said, in fact said it was absolute rubbish and couldn't possibly be verified or confirmed, nevertheless, that sentence, I'm sure, went home into many of the viewers.
Your question and his inability to answer, or
well, his statement that Allende was just the same. In other words, I say Pinochet was a torturer and murderer, and he was saying, but Allende was also a torturer and murderer. The fact is, Allende was not a torturer or a murderer. But that statement that goes in, it's a piece of propaganda, if you like, and it goes into the consciousnesses of everyone watching, and that's the terrible damage, I think, that false statements can make on a public thing like television.
Without being challenged immediately, and
exactly.
And what you did, though, I mean, you challenged it, so therefore, I would assume that the impact would be reduced by your challenge, and clearly.
Yeah, but I had to move very quickly I had to be very quick on my feet.
Back to you, though. Is there anything about? I mean, do you have any regret? Didn't your wife stand for Parliament, or wasn't she in Parliament?
No.
She never was.
No.
Lady Antonia Fraser was never in Parliament.
No.
I don't know why. I thought maybe she was. Hey, does the political life, did it ever have attraction for you? Just to say, enough talk, let's do something.
Well,
I know you and I once talked about Tony Benn as your hero, or you liked him, or you admired his politics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but did the idea...
You mean becoming a politician?
Yes, I mean exactly becoming a politician.
No.
None.
No, I'm
not tempting for a moment to say...
I couldn't possibly join a party.
Not a political party.
A political
Any
party.
other party, you'll be
party,
there.
Sure, I'm right up for it. But a political party is not possible for me. I don't think that it would ever have worked. I prefer to be an independent political intelligence, shall we say, as a citizen.
And pointing out to what you consider to be the flaws and failures and vulnerabilities of Western democracies, in part.
Well, absolutely. I think this is there's so much of it which we really accept and are resigned to. I find that so many people, unhappily, are simply bewildered and resigned to what governments do in our name. Like, I'm talking about the United States, and I'm talking about Great Britain. Actions are taken in the name of its citizens.
Well, give me the most egregious example, say, first of your government and then of mine.
Well,
egregious example. Don't go back to Vietnam or but
no, that's a long one.
That's easy too.
Yeah. Well, my government. I think the most egregious example is the subservience of my government to your government,
including including Lady Thatcher and including Tony Blair and including John Majors and including...
Oh, my God, yeah, absolutely.
Well, Winston Churchill came here, you know, and begged Roosevelt to come to his rescue.
Yeah. I know that, yes.
Yeah, I know you do.
But that was quite a long time ago.
Well, I mean, so...
I'm talking about more and more. I'm actually talking...
What is the subservience that offends you? Is it... what?
Well, for example, I regard the NATO bombing of Serbia as a criminal act. I regard it as a bandit act, an act that is outside the parameters of the United Nations, and that it even actually offended the basic rules of NATO
and
itself.
How would you compare that evil with that? I mean, what you would characterize as a criminal act? That criminal act with ethnic cleansing and the kinds of brutalities that have continued to be discovered, you know, in Kosovo, for example.
You know, one criminal act is the same as any other criminal act, if it's a criminal act.
Okay, if you define the bombing as a criminal act.
Oh, yeah.
Which you did.
Which I do, and I think
the
the bombing of the marketplace in Niš in Yugoslavia was a criminal act.
Because it was intentional?
Oh, well, absolutely.
To bomb that particular place, or if ever you bomb in which there is a risk of human killing.
Oh, no. There was no risk. I mean, it's not a question of risk.
Okay.
This was a deliberate act. Also, the bombing of the television studio in Belgrade, which was a deliberate act.
Yeah.
Also,
in order to bring Milosevic to his knees.
Well, to terrorize the civilian population. Yeah. That's what it's doing.
Go then to Kuwait, and this because I enjoy your dialogue. Go to me with me to Kuwait and Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait.
Yeah.
Any problem with the response to that, with the Gulf War?
Well, I think the Gulf War was, I think there are all, you know, people were dying to find a diplomatic answer to that, and it wasn't given a chance. Your country
wasn't given a chance.
No. The diplomatic procedures were not given a chance.
Get the hell out of Kuwait, or
there is such a thing as diplomacy. You know, there's been something as diplomacy for hundreds of years, and I don't think it was given a chance because I think the United States had decided at that time to go for Saddam Hussein. And I believe,
and they used this simply as an opportunity. You don't think they wanted it? You think the United States really wanted to go in there with American troops and Saudi troops and British troops and push him out of there because they wanted to get him rather than because...
It's all about power and oil, isn't it? I mean,
well,
all that. I think
well,
that
certainly was an issue.
Also, may I say that, in fact, I will say, right, whether you grant my permission,
yes,
permission or not, that well over, it's 11 years ago, the Gulf War.
Right.
And we are still, I say the US and Great Britain, are still killing people in Iraq. With the sanctions are killing thousands of children. And the bombs are actually killing people every other day, you know, like including a lot of shepherds. You know, they seem to go for shepherds. This is an act. This is again an act of terrorization outside United Nations parameters.
There is that argument to be made, but you have you seem to have in that statement no condemnation of the fact that Saddam Hussein could stop it in a moment.
Oh, you think so?
Yes.
How?
That he could stop the sanctions. Oh, I think it could stop the sanctions, which lead to what you're characterizing as the violence against children, which a lot of people share that view, in a moment, if he would, do a whole series of things that the UN resolution calls for.
You know, we could stop the sanctions, too.
Granted. Yes, granted.
I mean, my question is this.
They were imposed as a result of...
Who the hell do we think we are? That is my question. Who the hell do we think we are?
We being the United States and Britain,
yeah,
right, and NATO.
And NATO, acting entirely unilaterally.
Yeah. I tell you who the people in Serbia and I tell you who the people in Bosnia and Kosovo think we are saviors.
You think certainly the Albanian terrorists? Well, they certainly think we're saviors. Well, we've saved their lives.
The KLA. Well, we're not so happy with them now, are we?
Listen, the KLA we actually supported, sustained, and trained.
Yeah.
They are known to be, they were always known as bandits. They're a bandit force. Now, they're out of our control. This has happened so much, so many times.
Yeah. And now look where they are over in Macedonia.
Well, they've actually ethnically cleansed hundreds upon hundreds of Serbians, by the way. But we're supporting them.
Do you, this is so interesting, do you believe that Milosevic is a sympathetic character at all?
No, I don't. But nor do I.
And what do you think ought to be?
Nor do I believe that President Clinton is a sympathetic character. Nor do I believe that Prime Minister Blair is a sympathetic character.
And that they all three ought to be at the dock in The Hague?
You got it.
Do you really?
Sure.
With equal
It's not a question of equal. You know, if anyone has any criminal...
In other words,
we're not making... Of course, Milosevic is a criminal.
Right.
Okay?
But you're saying, of course, Blair's a criminal, and of course,
Yes.
Clinton is a criminal.
Absolutely.
Because what?
Because they acted outside... Their action was actually illegal.
Go ahead.
It was also, I contend, immoral. It was also arrogant and indifferent to the fate of the people. And I don't think it had anything to do with humanitarian intervention. I think that term is ludicrous and only good for a laugh. What it was to do with was an assertion of power.
They're uncovering every day the...
My dear fellow, have you...
My dear fellow, there are more bones uncovered in Kosovo from...
Have you been to Turkey recently?
No, I haven't.
Well, you should.
Because?
Why did we... You know, one thing...
Which part would I...
well, for example, one thing that you may have noticed we...
What's happening to the Kurds? What's happening to the Kurds? Is that the point?
Have we ever bombed Istanbul?
No. Because, and you're suggesting they're doing everything to the Kurds that Saddam Hussein did to the Kurds.
Certainly am, and more so.
And more so.
Yeah.
And why don't we do it? Because the Turks are our allies.
That's right.
Welcome to big power politics,
all
sir.
in the same big bed.
Yeah.
The NATO bed, you know? And I think this is...
Well, that's true, but we also don't retaliate against the Chinese.
And the Chinese don't retaliate against us?
For the same human rights violations that we would get...
You know, this whole thing of human rights violations and preserving...
That's your subject.
It clearly is yours, too. I would like to just point out that I believe that the prison system, the penal system in the United States, is...
There's one more European coming to beat us to death about the death penalty.
Oh, not just the death penalty.
Yeah.
I mean, you have... there are many, many human violations taking place at this very moment in this extraordinary penal system you have, which is more or less like, you know,
no question about
not
that.
just the death penalty.
Yeah, I'm not to say no question about it. Clearly, I mean, they're documented every day by reporters across this country. Some, some of the atrocious conditions and violations of respect for human dignity.
And the use, I remind you, of what are effectively torture weapons. I mean, a stun gun, a stun belt, a restraint chair. These are weapons of torture, you know.
Yeah.
And I think you say that they're writing about it all over the country.
But you think that just stay with me for a second.
Yeah.
In terms of the motivation, the motivation that led Milosevic to send to take the actions in his name or in Serbia's name that took place in, say, Bosnia or in Kosovo. The motivation was the same or was no different for NATO in terms of what they did, or does it matter because the end result is innocent people died in both cases, and they have in some great jurisdiction the same, they deserve the same opprobrium?
Yes, I believe...
Don't motivation make a difference and doesn't, you know...
Well, firstly, I believe there was a civil war going on in Kosovo between the Serbs and the Albanians.
And we should have left them alone.
No, I didn't say that. There are other ways of dealing with it, with such a situation, rather than going in and bombing the...
Jesus.
That's it. There should be other civilized ways of dealing with things, you know. And in fact,
civilized ways. What do you think they tried to do?
The Rambouillet.
Yeah, exactly where I was coming. That was
I'm there. I'm there with you. The Rambouillet conference
was a disaster, a farce.
Well, of course it was a farce. It was a charade, right? But not only was it, but why was that? Because we went in there and we gave them, the U.S. gave them, what is it when you jump over the... They gave them a hurdle they couldn't possibly jump over.
They created a standard they couldn't.
Well, they said,
achieve.
you know, we're going to take over your country.
They put the bar too high.
They certainly did. They knew they couldn't meet it. So that was a very, very provocative act in the first place. And it was intended. It was deliberate.
Here's what my problem with you in the end, though, is.
Okay.
Not with you, but with the difference in the opinion, is that you seem to see no difference in levels of whether you describe them as whether they're criminal acts or not. You seem to make no distinctions between acts that lead to violence against human beings in terms of the motivation, in terms of other factors. You seem to say...
Can I answer?
Yes.
Yes. You know, I believe that our memories are very, very short. and we're encouraged to forget. I wrote a piece once called It Never Happened, and I talked about what actually happened in El Salvador, and in Guatemala, and in Indonesia, and East Timor. Our responsibility, the United States, without any question, responsibility. These actually amounts to millions of people dead. Millions. Not 2,000, not 10,000, but millions. And all to preserve the power and authority of the United States, in fact. And these things are pushed under the table and are simply forgotten, and the plight, the fate of these people is it just simply disappears like their children disappeared. The fate of the
in Chile or in East Timor or wherever.
Absolutely. In East Timor, there's a total. It's one of the most scandalous things that's ever happened. 200,000 people dead at the nod.
Because we wanted to be friends with Indonesians.
Absolutely. Well, business is so good with Indonesia, or it was. Business was great with Indonesia, and there was a hell of a lot of oil, and trade really worked. So East Timor was irrelevant.
And look what they did to the communists, too. That was
in 1965.
Right.
They killed 500,000 communists. Absolutely. Right. You got it. And that, again, was absolutely our responsibility. It couldn't have happened without the subscription of the United States and indeed Great Britain and Australia. So I'm looking at kind of masquerades of the way I am saying that it's very, very clever. You know, you can kill somebody or you can tell somebody else to kill somebody. You remain saying either, oh, that's very bad, I wonder how that happened, or you shouldn't have done that, or good, you know. Okay. So I think the nod is as good as a wink.
Yeah. Now I'm going to give you the reason to really disagree with me. I think that this is, I don't want to do this, but I believe it so. I would believe this is rather an extraordinary country, an exceptional country. I believe in the notion of exceptionalism for America and the democratic experiment here. Not without flaws. Not without serious flaws, and not without having done some...
Last election was certainly a flaw.
Another show. Yeah. The last what do you mean by the last election? Because it was stolen from Al Gore? Is that your point?
No, I think it was very suspect what actually happened. The Supreme Court coming in at the last moment. Very strange, shall we say, bizarre for a democratic procedure. You know
what we're going to do before you leave here? I promise you, if I have to come over to Lincoln Center and get you and bring you over here, we're going to have a great political debate that you enjoy at this table on some of these subjects. Will you do that with me?
I hope to.
All right. Yeah. It's great to have you. What you have just seen is why Harold Pinter, both in terms of talking about language and his love of theater and love of words, and also in his body of work at the Lincoln Center Festival, which I have a card here that says something about it, but also because of the passion that he brings to his own ideas and his beliefs, and therefore making him worth listening to. The Lincoln Center Festival 2001's Harold Pinter Festival runs through July 29th. The Spaces Between the Words, a tribute to Harold Pinter, presented by the Film Society Lincoln Center, runs through July 29th. I like you very much, and I'm pleased to have you on this program.
Thank you very much. Glad to have been here.
Harold Pinter, back in a moment. Stay with us. Right.
And the fellow who directed it was in 1957 at the University of Bristol. It's a man called Henry Wolfe. And he acted in it too. He was a student. And he's now 70 like I am. We're very, very old friends, as you can see. And he's acting in it again, you know,
that's great.
In the room. So that's, I'm doing that. The other play there is Celebration, which is my last play. Yeah. So there are 43 years between the two plays. And I find that rather strange and rather exciting.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about someone who does what you do, for writers, there's not much. I mean, even for dramatists, you don't think much of. This is almost like an artist retrospective for an artist, for a painter. Correct?
I think it is.
I mean, it really is an opportunity for a theater-going public to see the multiplicity of the creative career of an artist.
Yes, yes.
Is the creative process the same in all of this? You know, the sense of putting the words on the page, whether it's a poem or a screenplay or a play?
Oh, yes, I think so. It's always the same. I never know what's going to happen next. I never know what the blank page and something goes onto it, and I don't know when I turn the page over, I don't quite know what that's going to bring either. So it's all wonderful. It is a true voyage of discovery, you know, writing. For me, it is.
The process of doing
I never
it.
plan a play, you see. It just happens after a while. An image happens, and then the next thing happens, and then, you know.
But just to go back to The Room for a second.
Yeah.
It is said about a lot of your work, it starts with an image, a picture in your mind. Where was it for The Room?
Oh, that's right. Well, I don't know if you know, it was man Quentin Crisp.
Oh, sure it is.
Yes, of course you must. Well, I actually was
Still alive, isn't he?
I think not.
But recently, I mean, he's been alive.
Recently,
you know,
very recently.
Yes.
Well, anyway, in short, I was at a party once when I was very young, 25 or something.
Right.
And I was taken to a room. Someone said, you have to meet someone in another room in this house. And I went to this room, and there was a man with bare feet, fluttering around, serving bacon and eggs to an enormous man who was sitting at a table reading a comic, you know?
Yes.
And no, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. I still do a bit of acting.
I know you do, but it's not what has driven your career.
No. But I was also, even long before I was an actor, I was a writer. I was a poet when I was about 12.
I know, yes.
So I'm essentially, shall we say, a poet.
Yeah, you think of yourself most of all as a poet?
I think of myself mainly as a writer.
Yeah.
But I'm simply saying that I was, I start acting at school when I was about 16. I played Macbeth and Romeo. Yeah, that's right. How do you know all this?
Well, we hear about you. And were you bitten by it then? I mean, the notion of being able to go on stage and do your stuff?
No, then, when I was about 19, it seemed to me the only way I could possibly earn a living was by acting. I had no intention of going into any kind of office. And I managed to just stagger along and earn a few pennies, you know, acting. But I was writing all the time anyway. Not plays. I didn't start writing plays until the mid-50s.
Yeah, why?
I mean, one of the things that, by the way, does please me very much is that in this part of one of the plays that's being done here during this season, this festival, is a play, my very first play, The Room. This fellow turned out Quentin Crisp, and the man fluttering around.
Yeah.
The other man never spoke. And he was talking very
Crisp is the man fluttering around, not the man sitting down being fed
Crisp was the
eggs.
man fluttering around.
Yeah, right.
And he was very talkative and very lively and engaging. But the point was he kept feeding the man, the big man.
Yeah.
And when I left the room after about 10 minutes, this image didn't go away. And finally, a couple of years later, you know, or a year later, my friend Henry Wolfe from Bristol said, I told him about this. And he said, well, why don't you write a play about it? I said, well, I will, but I might.
Yeah.
And then he called me and said, where's the play? And I said, what play? And he said, well, you said you were writing a play, and I need it in 2 weeks because I can do it at Bristol, you see. Yeah. So I said, out of the question. But then I did write the play in 4 days. Yeah. And I changed Quentin Crisp to a woman.
Right.
You know.
It's a woman fluttering around, serving bacon and eggs to a man. To a man sitting there.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but everything else was the same, in a sense. You just gender changed, or did it give you an opportunity to play dynamics of sexual roles?
Well,
Harold Pinter is here. The New York Times has called him, quote, one of the most important playwrights of our time. With plays such as The Caretaker, The Homecoming, and Betrayal, he has revolutionized theater. His blending of language and silence has influenced many playwrights. This summer, the Lincoln Center Festival celebrates Pinter as a playwright, an actor, a director, and a screenwriter. 9 of his 29 plays and 8 of his numerous films will be presented during the festival. I'm pleased to have him back at this table. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
So how do you feel about all this? I mean, at 70, all of a sudden the Lincoln Center says, let's have 9 of those plays and celebrate Pinter.
Well, it's gratifying.
Yeah.
I'm very happy about it. It's also very demanding, the whole thing. But I'm happy about that, too. I like to be challenged, and I think this is a challenge for everyone concerned, to do 9 plays in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Are you sorry at all that in a sense, a man who began as an actor, even way back at RADA, ended up spending most of his creative life as a writer?